Hello everyone, this is Kevin, your Apptrepreneur, and today we're going to be talking about a situation that actually affects a lot of people who use Ubers. This is not a news story. This is something that's going to probably be relevant for a very, very long time unless Uber makes some serious changes. And I want to start this video by saying almost apologetically that I am sad to report this video has been inspired by someone that me and my family know personally, and I'm saying this up front because, quite frankly, the mentality that this person showed for Uber drivers and how they work was frankly appalling. It was really, truly appalling. And so this person I know is going to be watching this, so I'm going to be sending it to him or her and basically saying, hey, here's the answer to your question. Stop trying to get Uber drivers fired. So what am I talking about? Well, he or she has a situation where they have to commute to New York, and they live in New Jersey. And they use Uber's scheduled pickup feature, which, by the way, that's never a good idea, to call an Uber and ferry them over New York. And several times, Uber drivers have gotten to them, saw where they were going, and basically refused to take them, and they canceled. And on the surface, from a customer perspective, this is awful. This is really bad customer service because, hey, I scheduled this ride, I'm paying money, I deserve to be taken to New York, and you know what? I'm going to get even with them. I'm going to tweet to Ariana Huffington and Travis Kalanick and say, hey, you know what? Uber drivers should be fined and fired if they refuse me service because Uber says that the drivers cannot refuse service. Except there's only one problem. This claim is bullshit. Seriously, this claim is utter bullshit. And I'm sorry. Uber drivers do not have to pick you up. Uber drivers are not contractually obligated to take you to your destination. Uber drivers are independent contractors. That means we can choose who we pick up, when to work, and where to go. And you know what? For the most part, unless we are refusing you service based on race, religion, sexual orientation, gender, or a service dog, guess what? We can deny you service for any reason. Heck, I know people who drive to someone and see they have a bad haircut and they choose not to pick that person up, mainly because certain haircuts are, associated with certain gang types and they just don't want that type of person in their car. And you know what? Hey, independent contractor, their car, their property, their business, as Uber likes to classify us. We are our own business. We have every right to refuse business to anyone. But if that's the case, what is the point of the scheduled pickup and why exactly would someone keep canceling? And let me just explain to this person why someone would not pick them up in this particular case. And part of it has to do with going over to New York. And the first thing we have to acknowledge is that, here's the thing, Uber drivers are not making a lot of money. I mean, if you watch my channel for any length of time, I am on an almost daily basis complaining about the rate cuts and how low Uber pays everyone. In fact, it comes into the conversation even when that's not the topic because that's how important it is. Most drivers are only making 64 cents a mile, and that's before Uber's take. Once Uber takes their cut, that person might be making 40 or 35 cents a mile. Now, you might say at this point, well, but wouldn't you want a long trip then? Like, wouldn't that make you more money? And in a sense, yes. Long rides, I personally prefer because longer rides, more money. In fact, that's why I love rides to LAX, because if it's a ride to LAX and I'm anywhere in a certain area or above, I'm pretty much guaranteed $40 to $60 for an hour's work. And I love that. And it's great. But here's the problem. After we drop you off, we have to come back, and coming back is on our dime. We do not get paid for that, and Uber doesn't compensate us for those miles. And trust me, that time and mileage can really add up. So let's just say, for example, this person picked you up in New Jersey and they brought you to Manhattan. And I don't know exactly the distance, but let's say it pays $75 to the driver, which means you're paying almost $100. Now that sounds like a good deal, but it takes an hour to get into New York. And while it's easy to get into New York, it's very difficult to get out of New York, aside from the traffic and the time, and that's all not being paid for. I mean, yes, the Uber driver can leave the app on, but if they leave the app on, they are going to get stuck in New York. And if I recall, Uber drivers in New York do have to have special licenses to operate in New York City, which means most people going into New York can't even take advantage of the New York lifestyle and traffic because they don't have the license to do so. So if they want to keep driving, they got to get out of New York as soon as possible, and that's not always easy. What's more, this person admitted that there was a toll or two involved. And here's the thing about tolls. Uber will pay the tolls on the way to the location. But coming back from the location, the driver's on their own. Now, assuming that this person was going to Manhattan and they had to cross the bridge, I think that's at least a $10 or $15 toll each way. So this person might make $75, and on the way, there's some tolls that go by, and they don't have to worry about taking those tolls. But on the way back, they have to cut out an hour or so of time, and they have to spend gas to get back. Now, that's probably $15 to $20. Then they have to pay the $10 to $15 toll. Now, their earnings have essentially been cut in half, if not more. Gee, I'm wondering if this sounds very profitable yet. So you see where I'm going with this? In some cases, going this long route, it doesn't always pay to do it, because if there are extra expenses involved coming back and the amount of time to come back is outweighing the profit, why would an Uber driver who is their own business owner and is doing this to make money want to take a position like that? But now you're probably asking, well, but I scheduled my ride. They should have known that beforehand. Why didn't they know that beforehand? And why did they even accept it if they knew that was the case? Well, remember how I said earlier that doing the scheduled pickup was a mistake? Here's why it's a mistake. Because the Uber drivers do not know it's a scheduled pickup. Seriously, we don't know. We do not know if there is a scheduled pickup or if it's a regular pickup. The scheduled pickup does absolutely nothing except call the Uber at the time you set it to call. In fact, really, if you set the alarm to go off at 8 a.m. and you tap the Uber request button, that is the exact same thing the Uber app will do. And the driver has no idea where you're going when they accept the ride. And when they get to your location and they pick you up and they see where you're going and they realize how much time it's going to be and what it's going to cost. And by the way, I even forgot to say, some people don't have the time to do it because they're only doing it for a little bit of time. They pick you up, they see you're going an hour or an hour and a half away. That's like a 2 to 3 hour round way trip for them. They might have something else they need to do. They don't have time to do that. So they pick you up, they see where you're going. They had no idea that's where you are going. And it's like, hey, I'm sorry, gotta go. In fact, I had to do this one time because I was doing a little bit of Lyft driving, and this was before the whole delete Uber thing, but I was doing some Lyft driving, trying to get their hourly guarantees, pick someone up. I had a dinner reservation with my parents who were out of town, or they were from out of town, I should say, at 5:30. It was 4:30. I could do one more ride if it was like around 30 minutes. This person wanted to go 2 hours away, and I had to very politely and calmly explain to them, I'm sorry, I don't have 4 hours. I need to meet my parents. I have dinner reservations. And of course, they got all upset and said, well, why do you do this? Can't you? It's like, no, I can totally tell you to get out of my car. I can tell you I'm not going to take you. I don't owe you anything, especially not for what you're paying me. I mean, for less than $1 a mile, I am doing you a favor. I am doing you such a favor. I do not owe you anything. This is my car. This is my time. This is my business. And if I say get the hell out of my car, you get the hell out of my car. On a side note, I want to encourage everybody who is a driver watching this, please control your temper in these situations. If they start getting belligerent, don't lose your temper in return. You don't know if they're filming you and they're very upset. If they get too belligerent, you know, start the ride and wave down the first cop you see. That's basically what you do at that point. And then, of course, the thing that bothered me about the situation, and particularly because of someone I know who was in this situation, is I feel for their problem. They scheduled a ride, they thought they were guaranteed a ride, and they were refused service. But to call for the drivers' heads when the drivers are making so little money and would be losing money. This person is a bleeding heart liberal Democrat. I would hope they would be sympathetic to the idea that, hey, if this person took you, they are officially doing you a favor because they are not making money at this point. They might even be losing money. And you know what? That is not the passenger's fault, admittingly. That is Uber's fault. So the question now comes up, for people who need to schedule rides, what do they do? Well, good for you. I actually have the solution. It just involves not being on the Uber platform. This is where Lyft's scheduled pickup features are super important, and they will save the passenger, which is you, a lot of time. Because the way the Lyft scheduled pickups work is that you make the scheduled appointment. I recommend usually a couple days in advance, and they will show up to people who are in your area. And the driver can see where they're picking you up, where they're going, how long it will take, and how much they can expect to make. And if the person selects your ride, it means that they are fully aware that this is how the trip is going to go, and they accept those terms, and you are far less likely to have them cancel on you when you get there. Now, it should be noted that once in a while, someone won't select this, and then they just have to send it to the randomest person who was close by. But even then, it will be marked this is a scheduled pickup. So if that person presses that button and accepts it, they know that it's probably a decent distance, because most people do not do scheduled pickups unless they're going to like the airport or something, and they have a pretty good idea up front whether or not they want to accept a ride like that. Now, some would say, well, I shouldn't have to go to Lyft to basically to a service that I was promised. And you know what? You're right. You are right. But the way Uber has it set up, the drivers don't know where you're going. There is no way for them to know until they get there. And the drivers are paid so little and not compensated for the trip back that, you know what? They're going to lose money sometimes. And sometimes they have to say no. And if you don't want them to say no, instead of texting and tweeting Uber and Ariana Huffington and Travis Kalanick about fining drivers for not doing it, you need to tell them that the payment needs to include some compensation for the trip back if the trip is long enough. And here's the thing. I know why Uber and Lyft don't usually want you to know where the passenger is going. And I'm not going to explain why now. I will make a separate video for that because I think it's a topic that we definitely need to address on this channel at some point. But the bottom line is it would help if we knew where you were going. It would help because if we knew where you were going up front before we accept that ride, we wouldn't have to be blindsided, because here's the thing. We hate canceling on you. We really do. And it's a problem, but sometimes we have to do it. We feel really bad when we go to someone and they want to take a 2-hour trip, and it's like, whether because of costs or the fact we have prior commitments or both sometimes, it's like, hey, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I know you factored in, you know, that you're going to have the next 2 hours free and that you're willing to pay this much money for the ride, but we didn't factor in double that time and having to cut that amount in half. That is a legitimate reason why some people do like short trips, because they don't wind up in the middle of the state where they don't live and they don't have any friends, and they're not on the bill to drive back without compensation. I mean, I will for the most part, but that's because I have another trick, which I won't describe here because for a passenger, it doesn't really matter. And I'm just going to say on a final note, this person that I know is a U.S. elected official, a liberal, heart-bleeding Democrat, and it's really disappointing that the first reaction they had to Uber drivers canceling on them multiple times was to call for the driver's head when they're the ones that are suffering way more in the situation than anyone. If this is a reoccurring thing, I would probably do some research first to find out why it keeps happening. And this is why it keeps happening. And while this is one situation, the situation only has so many variables, and this is a version of why an Uber driver would cancel on you. And here's the thing, they have every right to do it. I mean, if they cancel too many rides, yes, they will get terminated. But it rarely gets to that point. It rarely gets to that point. They will almost always accept the ride. But you know what? When you start throwing toll roads in and long distances, that's when things can become a real, genuine problem. And I wish passengers were a little bit more sympathetic to this, but of course they aren't. And this is why the drivers are not fought for very much, because to actually fight for the drivers to be paid better and compensated for their time and compensated for the trip back, Uber will pass that cost on to the consumer, and the consumer simply doesn't want to pay it. I want to state right now that taxi drivers, one of the reasons they are so expensive on these long trips is because they are factoring in at least some of the costs for the return trip in the fare. But what do all of you drivers think? Do you think that this is right to do to the passengers? What about passengers? Do you feel slighted by this, even having it explained why the drivers would cancel it? Or do you agree now? Do you understand? And as a driver, when do you personally cancel? When do you draw the line and say, I'm sorry, I can't take you. I just can't, and I know you're going to complain, but I have to take that chance. I would love to know. Comment below, like, favorite, subscribe, share this video with friends who might not understand how this works. If you are a fan of my videos, consider becoming a Patreon member or buying some swag from the Great Media Universe store. It does help out. And as always, flame responsibly, and oh yeah, hashtag delete Uber.